Audience, let me hear you. Are you ready to keep Florida free? Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to your governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis.
Are you happy to live in the free state of Florida?
Yeah!
Are you going to work hard on November 8th so we can keep it that way?
Hoorah! Yeah!
And will you help me make sure we can send a tired, worn-out old donkey out And will you do your part and hope that other Americans across the country do their part so that we can, once and for all, fire Nancy Pelosi?
Yeah!
How many of you have already voted? How many of you are voting on Election Day?
Yeah!
How many of you didn't raise your hand? What are you doing? Early vote. Who's going to early vote today? Okay, we got some early voters. Hey, it all counts. It's all good. We've got a lot of enthusiasm, and we're looking forward to a great night on Tuesday. Don't take anything for granted. You got to work very hard. You got to get out there. You remember 4 years ago, we were very close to having a much different pathway for this state. And I can tell you, if that had happened, you would be looking at states like Illinois, California, and New York, and you would say you'd be lucky to live there compared to what they would have done to Florida. We would have been in really, really difficult shape. But your support mattered 4 years ago. Of course, how many people have moved to Florida since that election, for instance? How many of you would have still moved if I had not been elected governor? None, okay. Well, one would have still moved. Well, yeah, I think at the end of the day, though, we've got a great opportunity, and we're looking forward to everything. Make sure if you've already voted, get some of your friends who may haven't voted yet. You know, not everybody who voted, there were people that did not vote 4 years ago that are now very excited about voting because they understand how important the governor's race is. And we had a situation in Florida, well, throughout the whole country, where governors were having to deal with things like COVID, and you saw California, New York, and Illinois, and they went a certain approach. And then you saw Florida, and we stood for freedom in Florida. We stood for your rights.
New York was a nightmare.
We were not going to let our state descend into some type of Faucian dystopia.
No.
We were going to make sure that even though so many people wanted to grind you down and lock you down, that we would lift you up. And I remember in the July of 2020, there was all kinds of hysteria. Everyone was attacking me because businesses were open, and we had already said all the schools must be open, and people were hitting us, all this stuff, which is fine. But I got a letter from every Democrat member of Congress from Florida saying that it was wrong to have things open, it was wrong to have kids in school, and they said, what we want you to do is shut down the state of Florida. They said, we want you to make people shelter in home, mandates, the whole 9 yards. And, you know, I thought about that, and if we had done that, it would have destroyed the state of Florida. It would have thrown millions of people's lives into turmoil. It would have cost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jobs at a minimum. It would have caused thousands and thousands of businesses to go under, and it would have locked out millions of kids from being able to be in school in person 5 days a week. Now, That's easy to say now, but at the time, there was massive hysteria, particularly with corporate media. And you had the left attacking me, even had some weak Republicans attacking me about this. And so it was a situation where we were taking a lot of incoming on it. But at the end of the day, I knew that as a leader, I've got to be more concerned with saving the jobs of the people I represent. Than
Hoorah! Yeah!
I wasn't worried about the political fallout. I wasn't worried about the attacks. I just wanted to make sure we did what was right. And so, I took that letter, I crumpled up that letter, and I threw it in the trash can.
Yes!
And you see what was happening in Florida, all around the country, actually people around the world, over the last couple years, have looked to us for inspiration as being a beacon of freedom in this country. People who were treated horribly in some of these other states and localities, when they had enough, the first place they would think of was getting to Florida. Maybe just on a vacation. You did, yeah. Maybe you moved. Maybe there's a whole host of things that people did, but we serve that function in a way that we've never done before, and we're proud of it. And if you think about the results of it, we have outpaced the nation in basically every economic indicator for the last 2 years. We have the second lowest unemployment rate in the history of the state of Florida.
Yes!
And we've had led the nation in new business formations the last few years, far and away. And so you see that, you see the success. We also understood with education how important it was. They were locking kids out of school. Like the people that would lock them out in like California, though, those people who were making those decisions would have their own kids in person with private tutors or private schools. So it's really just a typical example of the elite living under different rules. But nevertheless, they were more interested in kowtowing to education unions and leftist politicians than they were in doing what was right for kids. And so we weren't going to go down that failed road. We were going to stand up for students and families. And so we were the first major state to say, come hell or high water, our schools will be open in 2020. And so we now have a little bit of evidence on the results of that, because you've seen massive problems in a lot of these other states. They just did the nation's report card. All 50 states take this test. It's the only thing everyone does. And Florida came in for 4th grade reading, number 3 in the country, and 4th grade math, number 4 in the country. And if you adjust the demographics, we're number 1 in both.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, the state of Florida led the way when all these other states were instituting policies that was causing freedom to wither on the vine. The state of Florida, we held the line for you and everybody in this state. We were around the country. We chose freedom over Fauciism, and we were
Yeah!
Another thing that we did to really lead the way was make sure we were not allowing them to impose things like vaccine passports and mandates on the people of Florida. They wanted a situation where they would circumscribe your freedom to participate in society based on whether you got a COVID jab or not. And in some places around the country, you'd have to show that to go to a restaurant, movie theater, all these other things. And that was not something that was going to fly in the state of Florida. And so we said that's a private matter for you to make a decision on. So we banned vaccine passports in the state of Florida very early on. We also saw them try to cost people their jobs based on getting a COVID booster, COVID shot. And you had nurses, you had nurses, you had cops, you had firefighters, you had other folks who had been working the whole time. Now all of a sudden they were going to be forced out of a job. Brandon wanted to do it out of Washington. Other companies wanted to do it. Some of the local governments in Florida wanted to do it on their employees. And we said that that's wrong. We called a special session of the legislature, enacted protections for Floridians so that nobody has to choose between a job they need and a shot they don't want. And that's the law.
Let's go, Brandon.
Now, they are now doing the CDC adding to the childhood immunization schedule COVID jabs for kids, young kids. And the fear is that states, localities, school boards, school districts, schools will use that CDC change as a pretext to mandate COVID jabs on school children. And I guarantee you, after this election, you are going to see that in different parts of the country. And in the state of Florida, since you have me, you don't necessarily have to worry about it because we think ahead. And we work with the legislature and enacted a law to say that in the state of Florida, you are not allowed to force COVID jab mandates on school children, period. Not going to happen as long as I'm around. If I'm not around, then it may happen, so just make sure you understand that. But we believe parents can make those decisions, and actually, in Florida, we have, under our Surgeon General's recommendation, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, he has said to parents that, don't do these jabs for your kids. There's not evidence that it's benefiting them, and to keep jabbing them every 6 months with this, and may be good for Pfizer, but it may not be what's right for your family. And so, we want to make sure we're protecting your rights to make those decisions. And I saw recently that earlier this week we had a visitor down in South Florida from Washington, D.C. I just got a report there's somebody wandering around aimlessly, seems to be lost.
Let's go, Brandon.
Maybe Joe. And so, he came down, and people are like, well, what do you think? Are you glad, or are you upset that he's coming down to campaign for these Democrats? And I'm like, honestly, I couldn't think of a better campaign gift than to have him remind Floridians that these Democrats vote with him 100% of the time on his agenda. Because that's not an agenda that's worked for Florida. It's not an agenda that's worked for the American people. And we don't want Biden's policies implemented at the state level from Tallahassee. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
We have the worst inflation because of his policies that we've had in this country in 4 decades. They tried to say that it wouldn't happen, then they said it was a blip, then they said it was going to go away soon, then they've claimed that it's peaked, and yet we continue to see it really for things that matter, like groceries, accelerate. And here's the thing, even if inflation stopped today, it isn't like you get those price increases back. It doesn't go back to what it was a year and a half ago. So people are eating that, and so it's more expensive than ever because they instituted policies that printed trillions of dollars, borrowed trillions, spent trillions when they were warned this is exactly what would happen. And then to compound that, as you're inflating the currency and causing the money supply and inflation, you're hurting and stopping so much of our own domestic energy production. So that's a double whammy, because one of the things that could help inflation is to be energy independent and to produce our own energy like we can and have the full potential to do it. But you're paying more for gas than you were 2 years ago. You're paying more for utilities, all this stuff, because those policies want to make it more difficult for us to produce our own energy here in the United States. They'll go and beg Maduro for energy, for oil. They'll beg the Saudis for oil. And of course, the Saudis, they don't like Biden because, one, they know he's weak, but two, he is playing footsies with the Iranians. He wants to do another Obama-type Iran deal, which gave them billions and billions of dollars that they used to foment terrorism. So Saudi is an enemy of Iran, and so they cut production at OPEC, and it was political because they're striking back at Biden. But here's the thing: if we were energy independent, we wouldn't be in this vulnerable position. It doesn't matter what the Saudis do. We've got more reserves in Anwar than they have in all of Saudi Arabia. We just need to use it. And so I hope. Well, first of all, I believe and be willing to bet that Republicans will win the majorities in both the House and Senate. I think it's going to happen. I hope they use that power that they have to force Biden to open up this production, to get permits going, to get leases going, and making sure that we can reclaim the mantle of being energy independent, which we were really just 2 years ago. We were energy independent. It's not just about, it's what we're paying is a problem, of course, but it's even deeper than just dollars and cents. It's national security, and it's about making sure that we control our own destiny with respect to very important things. So we're going to be looking forward to these Republicans doing something about that because this policy has been a total failure. And when you have things that happen, we had a hurricane come through Southwest Florida, and it ripped through the entire middle of Florida, came out Volusia County into the Atlantic Ocean. You had massive power outages, millions and millions of people. First of all, we had 42,000 linemen pre-stage, so you had the fastest restoration. But when the power goes out and things like that happen, windmills are not going to get the lights back on. Okay, they're not. You need oil, you need gas, and so it's very important from a dollars and cents, a kitchen table perspective for every Floridian and American. It's important for national security. It's also important for disaster response that we have reliable energy. So we want to be able to do that. So they've done those policies, which have been very damaging. And what is their response to that? They pass a piece of legislation called the Inflation Reduction Act.
Oh, yeah, right.
And they think that it's an insult to your intelligence because they think you're dumb enough to actually believe that this grotesque piece of legislation will reduce inflation. Of course it won't. What it does do is it creates and funds 87,000 new IRS agents. And I can tell you those IRS agents are not going to be auditing the limousine liberals. They're going to be auditing working people in the United States, sole proprietors, handymen, small business people that don't have the ability to afford a fleet of accountants or a fleet of lawyers, and they're going to use the complexity of the tax code to basically go after people they don't like. And so I look at that and think to myself, 87,000 IRS agents sicked on the American people. Every member of Congress that voted for that bill should have to face mandatory audit from the IRS every year. And I just want to know, okay, first of all, not like this money's going to cheese, but if you're doing 87,000 IRS, why not do 87,000 Border Patrol agents? But they want to pretend like the border isn't a problem. They've ignored all the millions and millions of people that have come from over 100 different countries illegally. They haven't cared about that. They haven't cared that the cartels are making an absolute fortune eating our lunch at the border. They don't care that the fentanyl coming into the country is at record levels, and not surprisingly, overdose deaths from fentanyl are also at record levels in the United States. But they don't care about that. They don't care that over 90 suspected terrorists came across the border, and that's just DHS's figures. There's probably many more that they don't know about. They haven't cared about that. They haven't gotten upset when criminal aliens come across the border. We had a sheriff's deputy in Pinellas County on the west coast of Florida killed by a twice deported criminal alien who had come across Biden's border 6 months prior. And you think if he had just done his job that that deputy would be alive today. But they don't care about that. They only care when we send 50 to Martha's Vineyard. They don't want that. They claim to be a sanctuary. They said to bring. They had a social services office that says all are welcome here for people coming from foreign countries. That's what they said. And yet You have border towns that are getting thousands and thousands of people. And first of all, yes, there's criminal aliens, drugs, all that. But even if the people are just normal people, you can't accommodate massive amounts of people in a community. There's social services, law and order, education, healthcare, all these things. So it's really tough. But yet no sympathy for the border towns. And yet you get 50 at the wealthiest enclave in the U.S., massive amounts of housing, Airbnb, hotels, all this other stuff. And did they accept the consequences of this open border on their little precious island? No. They declared a state of emergency and had the National Guard deport them the next day. It just shows you that we have elites in our country who want to impose policies on society, on you, on me, but they do not want to have to face the consequences of their very own policies. And we said that we're not stopping. We're going to continue to fight on the border. We're going to continue to fight and protect against illegal immigration. It's important.
Rules for thee and
So
not
I
for
would
me.
just rather than IRS, I'd rather fortify the border. I think that that's something that's more important. But you know, the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the nonsense that we see out of Congress, they just do such a lousy job. And part of the reason is you have people like Pelosi that have been there like 40 years. And if I had ability to do a magic wand, I would do term limits for members of Congress. That's what we need.
Send her home. Send her home.
One of the reasons why Florida's done well, and if you talk to people that, like realtors will tell me, people that move here, they'll say, why are you coming to Florida? And one of the things that they'll say is public safety. Because you've seen areas around the country turn their back on law enforcement. You've seen them enact soft on crime policies like eliminating cash bail like they did in New York. And also having prosecutors who get elected and decide they're not going to enforce laws they don't like. And so that gives license to a lot of people to violate the law. So what you've seen over the last few years in particular, you've seen police budgets slashed, crime has gone up. You've seen these policies implemented that has facilitated even more repeat offenders. I mean, think about it. In New York, someone will commit a serious crime and they get put right back on the street. And a lot of times they re-offend before they even stand trial for the crime they had previously committed. And it's a disaster. And then these prosecutors, they have ruined places like LA and Chicago and Manhattan and New York City and San Francisco because they get elected, usually on very radical platform, but they get massive amounts of funding for their campaigns by people like George Soros, who's pouring money in. And it's all part of a plan to put people in who they call them progressive prosecutors, but in reality, they're nullifying the laws that are passed in these jurisdictions. And so in San Francisco, they would let you steal $999 or less from a store. They said, we're only prosecuting people steal $1,000. Well, these stores started getting looted left and right. You started seeing all these crimes. There are people, I talked to a guy in San Francisco, someone broke into his house to rob his family, and they wouldn't prosecute the criminal for doing that. You know, I just think about like your house is like your castle. You have a right to, you should, first of all, the police should be willing to go in and help, and the prosecutor should prosecute. But I will also say this, and we dealt with this down in Southwest Florida. We said very clearly to people in the aftermath about that, you do not loot in the state of Florida. We will hold you accountable with the law, but honestly, you break into somebody's house in a Second Amendment state, it's not going to be a good day for So they let people steal and do all that stuff, and it's created a total cesspool in a lot of these places. And like I've talked to people like a lot of the women I've talked to in LA, they take off all their jewelry just to be able to go shopping, like normal shop in broad daylight too. Chicago, you could be on Michigan Avenue in broad daylight now and you could get mugged. And so that's a result of woke ideology infecting criminal justice policy. And in the state of Florida, you never saw me marching against the police during the George Floyd riots. You saw us stand by law enforcement. You saw us enact tough on crime policies. And when we had a prosecutor in Tampa that said he wasn't going to enforce the law, I removed him from his position.
You're fired. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And we'll continue to stand for law and order. Safe communities are important. If you don't have that, economy, education, all that becomes much less important if you don't have basic safety. So we'll continue to do that, and we appreciate all the support we've gotten from the law enforcement community. But when people come and they make these decisions about, hey, we're going to do, we like Florida because it's safe, all this stuff. Another thing that I think we've really done, and you see the contrast. I got invited last weekend. I went up to the state of New York to campaign for our governor candidate there. Are any of you originally from New York? Okay. All right. So, and I talk to New Yorkers who move down here all the time, and they're frustrated with the bad management and the bad policies that they have up there and in other states too, with people that are coming down. And if you think about comparing Florida to New York State, we have millions of more people than New York State does now, and yet their budget for the state is over twice the size of our budget. Their taxes are way, way higher than our taxes, and yet when people come down from New York, they tell me, you guys have better roads, better services, better infrastructure, and we now know we have better performing K through 12 schools. And so where is this money going that they're taxing people with? It's going in people's pockets. It's a corrupt deal, corrupt system. And so in Florida, we respect taxpayers. You have no income tax in the state of Florida, and we will never have that. And you have the second lowest tax burden in the country on a state basis. And I'm going to work with these guys. We're going to do the biggest tax relief in Florida history next year. We already did the biggest this past year. We're going to do much more. And we're looking forward to doing that. And with all of that, we had a $102 billion budget to end the past fiscal year with a surplus of $22 billion, the largest in Florida history. And so you see the fiscal good management in Florida, mismanagement places like New York. You see people want to invest in Florida. They're fleeing there. People have moved their companies there, like manufacturers. Like, I got to get out of there. I'm coming to Florida. So there's more jobs for us here. We actually have more people employed than we did prior to COVID. That's not true in a lot of these other states. In fact, if you look, Biden will claim, oh, we've gained X number of jobs since he's been president. But the vast, vast majority of those are jobs that were just replacing the jobs lost because of the COVID. If you look at the things that are actually new beyond that, it's almost all Florida and Texas doing those new jobs. I mean, that's just the truth. So we had that. And then it's also a question of, you have, we do the good things right. We focus on what's important. How is the state managed beyond even just fiscal? So we had the hurricane and Hurricane Ian, and it did a lot of damage. It did damage to a causeway and a bridge in Southwest Florida, a bridge to Pine Island, a causeway to Sanibel, big causeway, 3 different breaks in it. Pine Island Bridge knocked out, and these are not Florida roads or bridges. It's a county thing, but they were being told, the residents, it's going to take 6 months to be able to get some type of a solution here. And so they came to me and they said, can you help us? Like, if we do 6 months, our islands are going to die. And I'm like, yeah, we'll help. And so we worked with our Florida Department of Transportation and said, okay, I don't want any red tape. I don't want any bureaucracy. I don't care about the feds. I'll fund it. I have a surplus. I will fund it. But we need to get this done very quickly. And so we took the mantle on it.
Yep.
We went to work. And we had to repair a bridge to Pine Island in 3 days.
Yeah. There we go. 3 days.
Now, if you think a state like New York would have been able to do a bridge in 3 days, then I've got some oceanfront property out in Arizona I'd like to sell you. Not going to happen. So we're proud of being able to manage and being able to get things done for folks. Another area that we've really, I think, done well is on security of our elections and our election system here in Florida. You remember in 2020, we actually counted the ballots when they came in and produced the results. These other states are taking days, sometimes weeks to do it. And so, but we didn't change the rules during COVID. We followed the rules and everything like that. But we also said, okay, we got more to do. We saw some of the things that happened in some of these other states. So since 2020, I've signed legislation banning ballot harvesting in the state of Florida. We've signed legislation banning Zuckerbucks in the state of Florida. And to make sure that our election laws are actually followed and enforced, we created for the first time a unit in state government to basically investigate election integrity and voter fraud issues and bring prosecutions if warranted. And they just brought some charges the other day. There's a guy in Broward County, illegal alien,
There's a big
9-time
surprise.
criminal convict,
Wow.
and yet registered and voted in 2021 in 2 different elections.
Wow.
One of the elections was decided by like 30 votes.
Wow.
And so when you have, and in Florida, you cannot vote unless you are a U.S. citizen. That's just the way it is. We're not going to bend on that. And so when you have that happening in violation of the law, that could cancel your vote out.
Yeah.
And so you have a lot of people that take this very seriously, that they can go and make their voice heard. But if we have all these other and there have been people that have been convicted of sex offenses who voted in 2020 who are under charges, you're not eligible to vote. As they did do some stuff for felons, the voters did it on their own with an amendment, but not for sex offenses or homicide, and yet some of those voted. And so those were illegally cast votes as well. They just brought charges against a woman in Palm Beach who voted in multiple states. And so they're doing it. So the bottom line is, in Florida, because we now are showing how seriously we are taking this, people should know, if you are doing things like ballot harvesting, you're going to pay the price for doing that and violating our laws. So I think you can be rest assured that this is going to be the best run election anywhere of the all 50 states. It'll be efficient. It'll be transparent. And if it's not, if there's some supervisor that's not doing that, then we will hold them accountable to make sure that those mistakes don't happen again. Another area that we've been leading the nation on is on the issue of education. And yes, our performance, number 3 and 4 in 4th grade reading, 4th grade math. In reality, if you adjust for demographics, we're number 1 in the nation in both, because the states that are ahead of us are not diverse states, they're much smaller states. And so we're proud of that, and we're going to continue doing all we can to expand student achievement. But one of the things that's been really important to us over the last couple years is to ensure we're respecting parents' rights. And you have a fundamental right as a parent for the well-being and education of your kid. Schools, school districts, charter schools, private schools, all these things are important, but they don't supersede your rights as parents. And so we are making sure to stand by parents. We're going to make sure that parents are getting an education for their kids that they can trust, and that they have transparency on what's being taught to their kids in the curriculum. So we are doing that. We also have drawn a very clear line in the sand. The purpose of our schools is to educate kids, not to indoctrinate kids. And we have banned critical race theory in our K-12 schools. Not teaching kids to hate each other, to hate their country. We are putting a renewed emphasis on American civics, teaching kids about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and what it means to be an American. Also signed legislation making us have November 7th in school, where kids will be taught about the victims of communist regimes throughout history. My wife and I have a 5, a 4, and a 2-year-old at home, and I actually just came from my 4-year-old's t-ball game in Tallahassee to be with you all right now, and it was fun. Last game of the season, so we're sad to see the season end. But and my wife, does a great job, and she does a great job in everything she does. I think you guys know. now raised for she started a fund to help the victims of the Hurricane Ian. Even before the storm hit landfall, she was already doing it, and it's now raised over $54 million. I mean, that's huge. So, her and I are sensitive to young kids and what's being presented to them, particularly in school, but also, I mean, sad to say, I used to be able to watch cartoons when I was a kid. It wasn't a big deal. Now you wonder, what type of an agenda are they trying to put into even kids' programming? So it's a big problem. And so we had a bill that we signed, or that we worked the legislature on, called Parents' Rights in Education, which basically says to Florida parents, in Florida, you can send your kid to elementary school without worrying about them jamming sexuality and gender theory into the curriculum. It's wrong to be doing that with these young kids. It's wrong to teach some kid that they were born in the wrong body, or that they can change their gender. That is happening in other parts of the country. They don't want to admit that, but it is, and you have people that are showing that, and you have parents that are protesting this all over the country. So we, so this bill is coming up. The left was very upset. The media was very upset. The left, though, I think was smart enough to know, you people, other people in Florida, do not want to vote for candidates who are saying they need to inject this in the curriculum. So they know it's not a winning political issue at the ballot box. So what they tried to do is pressure corporate America to get involved and to oppose parents' rights in education. And so they went to Disney, who you may have heard of, based in Burbank, California, but has a big footprint in Central Florida, as you know. And honestly, it was smart, because their view is, if Disney gets involved in this, the reality is, since the 1960s, every single thing that Disney has wanted from Florida, it has gotten it. That's just the truth. Until now. We were not going to back down under corporate pressure. We are going to do what's right for you, your kids, your families, and for our state. And I signed the bill into law without hesitation because it was the right thing to do. Now, they, after the bill was signed, said, well, we're going to work to see that the bill's repealed. They demagogued it. They said all this stuff. And I'm just like, you know what, that's fine. But at the end of the day, you're getting this ridiculous privileges from Florida for decades. They have their own government that they control in Central Florida. They're exempt from laws that their competitors have to follow, and they get major tax breaks. And so what we said is, you wanting to sexualize young kids is not consistent with Florida values. While you may have a right to do that, I don't think it's smart business, but you may have a right to do that. You don't have a right to force us to continue subsidizing that activism or putting you on a pedestal. So we worked with the legislature, and because we did, now Disney's no longer going to have its own government in Central Florida. They're going to live under the same laws as everybody else, and they are going to pay their fair share of taxes in the state of Florida. But honestly, I think about some of these things. It's like, the fact that we're even having this debate, it's really a function of what I call the woke mind virus, infecting different institutions, really a stranglehold over the left wing of the Democrat Party. You also have corporations, universities, big tech, all this stuff. And it's just like, think about Florida. We had to do 2 years ago, and I was happy to do it, but I signed legislation protecting women's sports in the state of Florida. It's the right thing to do, but who would have thought even 5 years ago that you'd have someone swim on the men's swim team for 3 seasons and then switch to the women's team and then win the women's national championship? That's wrong. First of all, that's a fraud. Second of all, it is taking away opportunities for women athletes, for girls. And so in Florida, and we have 5'4", our son's 4, daughter's 5 and 2. They're all very athletic, and I don't know if my kids are going to want to do that when they grow up, but my daughters, your daughters should be able to compete with fairness and integrity in these athletic competitions. And in Florida, they will be able to do that. And unfortunately, we've had to even do more with some of the nonsense that's going on. So I think we've seen it with COVID, but we've also seen it in other things. Woke ideology is affecting the practice of medicine. You see these medical schools, they're now making like the doctors confess white privilege and things like that. It's really ridiculous, but it's really ideologically driven. One of the things that's been happening now at the increasing frequency is physicians performing sex change operations on children. These are minors. And they give them puberty blockers. They do other things to be able to basically try to change gender. And here's the thing. Teenagers go through a lot. I mean, it's a weird time. You know, you go through ups and downs, and over 80% of the dysphoria that is identified amongst teenagers resolves itself by the time they become adults. So you have a situation where a 15-year-old couldn't get a tattoo, but yet somehow could get a double mastectomy to try to change gender. It's wrong. It's ideology trumping evidence-based medicine, and we've European countries have a lot of like the Nordic countries started doing this stuff. They realized it was wrong, and we've had a number of people who are now adults who are coming supporting what Florida's doing. They went through this when they were teenagers, and they regret it, and they were harmed by it. And so we got the Board of Medicine to consider this, and they just came out with the final rule so that in the state of Florida, if you're doing things like puberty blockers for minors, sex change operations for minors, you are losing your medical license. But again, I mean, this would not even been something that people were talking about in the past. And so it shows you woke ideology is on the march in a lot of these different institutions. And in the state of Florida, we've been very strong on combating it. We have fought the woke in businesses. We have fought the woke in schools. And yes, we have fought the woke in the practice of medicine. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob in the state of Florida. Our state is where woke goes to die. We'll hold the line. And so we've got an important election coming up. I think we not only have a chance to do well in the governor's race, which is the most important race, of course, but we have a chance to we have right now 16 Republican members of U.S. Congress in Florida, and we have a chance to elect at least 20 going. So that'll be at least a 4-seat pickup in the state of Florida alone, which will be very good. We also have a chance to earn super majorities in the Florida legislature, both the House and the Senate. Are we on target for that still? Okay, this is the next speaker. He says he's going to get it done. Paul Renner. Is this your district right here? Maryland? Okay. Good. So you have an opportunity to get super majorities in the Florida legislature, which would be really, really good. And we're going to continue. We've had a lot of success across the state. I don't think we got everything done in Volusia we wanted to, but we got a massive success in school board races to help good candidates get elected to school board. We're going to continue to have some of those running in November. So this has a chance to be a very, very good election. So do all you can between now and then. You won't regret it. If you sat on the sidelines 4 years ago, you know that was a mistake. And if more people had done that, then we may be a very different fate. So I'm ready for a big victory. Are you ready for a big victory?
Yeah.
Are you ready to be able to say that we have kept Florida free? And are you happy and enthusiastic to be able to re-elect your governor for another term? Thank you all. God bless you. Appreciate it.